So what you want is peace of mind knowing that you and everything on your homestead is gonna be okay this winter. You want easier chores because you're gonna be battling that snow and cold. You wanna have everything ready and in place for next spring, because once that spring rush comes, you're gonna want every advantage you can get. Today, we're gonna be doing a whole bunch of stuff getting ready for winter on our homestead. I'm gonna take you along, share with you some tips so that you can get your homestead ready too. So one of the biggest things we have to deal with in the winter is our chickens. We keep about 130 laying hens. In the summer, they're out on pasture, but we gotta do something different for them in the winter. I've got this homemade hoop house here that I keep them in there in the winter. And one thing that you gotta do when you are taking your chickens from their summer housing to their winter housing is you gotta do it slow and easy. Because if you just do it bam, from one to the other, it stresses them out and they are not gonna lay well for quite a while, and sometimes then they don't recuperate and lay well ever after that. So what we do is we set up our electric net on the outside of the hoop house. There's a hole and a ramp, like a door into the hoop house right over there, and we put their egg wagon inside this net so that they can get into both places at the same time. Their feed is in the hoop house now, and so they're going in and out of there to get their feed. They're still laying most of their eggs in the egg wagon and they're sleeping in there, but they're getting used to being able to go into the hoop house. And so they'll be like this for about 2 weeks, and then we'll close off the egg wagon, get them all in there, and they'll be used to that, and it's just very low stress, so they keep up their good lay rate. The other major thing that I gotta deal with in the winter is the cows. So in the summer, they're out on pasture, they're eating grass, but in the winter, they've gotta have a lot of hay. This thing right here behind me is my DIY hay feeder. So it is something that I built. I used a fertilizer tank, and I would love to do a video about how exactly I did that and show you how to build one. If anybody's interested, let me know in the comments below. But I need to get them cleaned out and taken up by where the cows are so that I can start putting their hay in there. They are starting to eat hay now, and they're wasting a lot of it because I'm just throwing it on the ground at this point. So I'm gonna get that up there and get it cleaned out. So one thing I don't like about a hay feeder like I've got in my barn is that it's not portable, and the cows are going to the same place all the time and just making a mess. So with this thing, once it gets a little messy here, I can move it to a different spot. So I've still got some versatility even if they're not out in the pasture. Makes it so much easier to take care of the cows and keep them cleaner in the winter. That's another thing with their water that I'm going to show you in just a second. Hey Maddie, you want some hay? The other thing that I like to have portable for the cows is their water. Now, I'm not saying that the nice heated things that are set in place aren't a good idea, but there's pros and cons to it, I would say. And the big con that I see is that it's, again, in one spot where the cows are gonna make a big mess over and over and over, and it's hard to keep them clean, especially when you have a milk cow that you're trying to keep their udder clean so your milking's not as nasty in the morning. I really like to use just about as small a tub as I can get away with, that there's enough to be able to put enough water in there for a couple days, but small enough to be able to move around. And when it does get frozen, it's easy just to flip over and knock it on the bottom, get that out, and fill it up again. It's good to go. Have a frost-free hydrant as close to your animals as possible. So if you've seen our chicken video about how we keep our chickens in the winter, you'll see that we've got a frost-free hydrant down there by the hoop house, and I've got one up here right by the cow shed. And the other thing about it is, if you do need to go a little distance, is you can use a hose, but it's got to be a short enough one that it's easy to drain. So here's the hose that I use for the cows for the winter. It works pretty good. I would recommend getting a higher quality one though. This one kinks and it's super annoying. So the thing is with using a garden hose in the winter is that you just basically got to be able to drain it. Making so you can be able to stretch it out and get it downhill a little bit is great. And the other thing you got to think about is it's got to get air in the top so that the water can drain out. Just like when you were a kid, or maybe even now at the restaurant, when you get a straw, put your finger on top and pull water out of the cup. Same thing here. Once you let your finger off the top, the water comes out. So what I do is I just loosen it just a little bit at the top so it's not sealing anymore. Pull the hose out tight and let the water drain out. And then you're ready to go again the next morning. So probably about the first thing you'll think about when you're thinking about having your homestead ready for winter is having your shelter for your animals. And that is important, but it's probably not as complicated of a thing as you think. Beef cows especially can get away with a lot of not having really much shelter. I've even used like an A-frame thing. It was just like really small A-frame thing for a steer that I had. and just the one end was partially closed off, so that was barely even 3-sided. But I am a lot more picky about my dairy cow. Dairy cows seem to be a little more finicky, and you can see here what I've got is not even 3-sided, just a shed roof on the side of my barn. And for a lot of the winter, that's the shelter that they get. If it is windy and snowing and blowing and stuff, I've got my barn door here that I open so that they can get into the actual barn, and basically that becomes a 3-sided shelter. So your two biggest things you got to worry about is keeping your animals just out of the wind and out of the snow and rain. And then after that, the other thing that I'm worried about, since I have a dairy cow and I want to keep her udder clean every morning when I milk, is the way that I do the bedding. And the way that I do the bedding, I do a deep bedding system where I am cleaning off the piles of manure every evening so that it doesn't get nasty in there, but then I'm just layering more and more bedding on as the winter goes on. I'm not completely cleaning it out, just taking off the big piles, because she will often lay in them, and it is not fun to get out there in the morning to milk and have to hose off her udder. It's not fun for her, and it's not fun for me either. Find something that works for you. Make a plan for what you're going to do with the manure and how you're going to keep it clean in there. Give your animals the shelter that they need, but don't overthink it too much. They just need something to block the wind, keep the rain and snow off of them, and they'll be fine. They are designed to live that way. If you haven't seen it already, you're going to want to watch this video right here about how we get our garden ready for winter. If you have seen it, you can go ahead and check this one out. This one's about how to keep your chickens laying well as much as 90% all winter long.